I stood by the kitchen counter, the steam from my coffee curling into the pale morning light that slipped through the blinds. The smell of fresh brewed Colombian roast filled the air, rich, comforting. My silk blouse clung softly to my skin, the pale blue fabric cool against my arms. On the marble island in front of me sat a manila envelope, fat with legal papers. I glanced at the clock, 8:47 a.m. Any minute now, the call would come. From where I stood, I could see the street through the window. The maple trees were just starting to turn amber, and a light breeze sent the leaves dancing down the sidewalk. Across the road, parked in the driveway, sat a U-Haul truck. My parents' U-Haul truck. They didn't know yet. My phone buzzed on the counter, making me flinch. I set my coffee down and picked it up. The display read, Derek Real Estate. My real estate agent. I took a breath before answering. It's official, Madison, he said, his voice warm, almost proud. You're now the legal owner of 312 Oak Ridge Drive. My heart thudded. Oak Ridge Drive. The house where I grew up. The house my parents were about to move into, not realizing it belonged to me now. And as I looked around, a flicker of memory pulled me backward, to the day I first realized my family could take away the one place I thought was mine. I was 19 the summer it happened. Hot, sticky air clung to everything, and the old box fan in my window did little more than push it around. I had been working double shifts at the diner downtown, saving for my first car. It wasn't much, but it was my plan, my own way out. One Friday evening, I came home after a 14-hour day, smelling of coffee and fry grease, my legs aching. I opened my bedroom door and froze. The bed gone. My bookshelf gone. Even the little white desk where I used to write in my journal was nowhere in sight. In their place, stacked against the wall, were a few cardboard boxes of my clothes. Mom, my voice cracked. She appeared in the doorway, folding a towel. Oh, Madison, you're back. We sold the furniture. Your father's friend offered a good price. We're turning this into a guest room. The lump in my throat grew sharp and heavy. You sold my stuff? Without asking me? It's just furniture, honey, she said, her tone breezy. You're barely here these days anyway. You're always working. I felt my hands trembling. That desk wasn't just furniture. It was where I'd written my college essays, where I'd planned my future. That bed had been my safe place since I was 10. Dad walked past in the hall, carrying a toolbox. Don't make a big deal out of it, he said without looking at me. We need the space. I swallowed hard, blinking against the sting in my eyes. In that moment, I realized something. This wasn't my space anymore. Maybe it never really had been. That night, I sat on the floor of my stripped-down room, knees pulled to my chest. My grandmother's voice echoed in my mind from a conversation years earlier. One day, Madison, own the walls they think they control. That's when you'll be free. The next morning, before sunrise, I packed a duffel bag with my clothes, my journals, and the framed photo of Grandma from my nightstand. I walked out the front door without telling them where I was going. I didn't have much, no car, barely any savings, and no plan except that I wouldn't be coming back. But I knew one thing. I was done letting anyone decide what belonged to me. The first few months after I left were brutal. I crashed on the pull-out couch in my friend Jessica's tiny studio apartment on the east side of town. The couch springs dug into my back, and the only privacy I had was a thin curtain sheet hung to section off the bedroom. By day, I kept my job at the diner. By night, I picked up shifts at a call center that paid barely above minimum wage. My hands ached from carrying trays all day and typing scripts all night. Most mornings, my eyes were so puffy I barely recognized myself in the bathroom mirror. Still, I saved every spare dollar. I ate instant noodles and dollar menu cheeseburgers. I wore the same 3 pairs of black slacks to work. Every time I tucked a crumpled 20 into my shoebox savings stash, I reminded myself, this was temporary. Everything changed the night Mrs. Harper walked into the diner. She was a regular, mid-50s, sharp green eyes, and always impeccably dressed. But this time, she noticed me scribbling on a napkin between orders. "What are you working on?" she asked, sliding into her booth. I hesitated. Just ideas. For a business. Real estate, maybe. Her eyebrows lifted. You know real estate? Not yet, I admitted. But I want to learn. 2 weeks later, she called me. Mrs. Harper owned a small property management company, and one of her assistants had quit suddenly. It's entry level, she told me. But if you're willing to learn, I'll teach you everything I know. That was my first real break. The job was tough, long hours, endless paperwork, and a crash course in dealing with landlords, tenants, and contractors. I learned how to negotiate lease terms, how to spot a bad deal before it sank you, and how to talk to people who underestimated you. Some nights, I still worked the diner just to keep up with bills. But slowly, my life began to shift. I saved enough to buy a beat-up Honda Civic. I took online real estate licensing classes after work, my eyes burning from the computer screen. The day I passed my licensing exam, I cried in the bathroom at work. Not because it was easy, but because I had done it without asking my parents for a single dime. From there, the wins started stacking. My first commission check was only $1,200, barely enough to cover 2 weeks' expenses, but it felt like gold in my hands. Then came my first real client, a young couple buying their first home. They referred me to friends. Those friends referred me to more. I didn't tell my parents much. I kept my social media bland. Work's going fine, staying busy. No fancy photos, no flashy updates. I wanted my success to grow quietly, like roots beneath the soil, until one day it would break through the surface in full bloom. And in the back of my mind, a thought took root and stayed there. One day, I'm going to buy that house. It was 12 years after I'd walked out with that duffel bag. By then, I had my own brokerage firm, Harper and Lane Realty, named partly after the woman who gave me my first break. I owned 3 rental properties, a sleek downtown condo, and enough in investments to retire early if I wanted. But I wasn't done yet. That's when I heard through a former neighbor that my parents were in trouble. Dad had been laid off from the factory. Mom's side business wasn't bringing in much. The mortgage on Oak Ridge Drive was bleeding them dry. They were going to sell. I didn't hesitate. I called my attorney the same day. We kept the negotiations quiet. My agent handled everything through a trust, so the seller wouldn't know it was me. The irony wasn't lost on me. They'd once sold off my furniture without asking, and here I was buying the walls around them without them knowing. The closing date arrived. Papers were signed. The deed was mine. A week later, they called to tell me they were moving into a smaller place they'd found through a friend of a friend. That friend was my agent, Derek. I invited them over to catch up once they were settled. They showed up with grocery bags in hand, smiling like they hadn't once stripped my room bare. Mom started talking about how lucky they were to have found this place at the price they did. I let them talk. I wanted them to take it all in. We stood in the living room, freshly painted, sunlight pouring across the hardwood floors. On the wall, a framed black and white photo of Grandma in her garden caught Mom's attention. "That's your grandmother," she said slowly, eyes narrowing. "Yes," I said. "She always told me to own the walls they think they control."
Dad turned toward me.
"What's that supposed to mean?" I smiled, calm, steady, the way you do when every card in the deck is in your hand. "It means," I said, reaching for the envelope on the coffee table, "that this house is mine." They stared. Mom's mouth opened and closed, searching for words. Dad frowned, as if maybe he'd misheard. I slid the deed across the table. "Bought it last month.
Cash."
The silence was thick. Then came the flood, disbelief, awkward laughter, little bursts of pride tangled with shame. "You bought our house?" Mom finally asked. "No," I corrected. "I bought my house. You just happen to live here now." Dad rubbed the back of his neck. "So, what happens now?" "That," I said, taking a slow sip of my coffee, "depends on you." I let them look around again, at the elegant shelves lined with books I'd collected, the small but expensive sculptures from my travels, the framed real estate awards. Every corner of this place held a piece of my journey, my independence, my fight. For the first time, they really seemed to see me. The girl whose space they'd once dismissed was gone. In her place stood a woman who didn't need permission to belong. I didn't rush to answer Dad's question. I let the quiet stretch, the way a good negotiator does. They both sat down on the couch, still looking stunned. "You can stay here," I finally said. "But there are conditions." Mom frowned. "Conditions? We're your parents." "And I'm your landlord," I replied, my tone gentle but firm. "That means the terms are mine to set." I saw the flicker of offense in Dad's eyes, but I also saw something else, the realization that they weren't in a position to argue. "First," I said, "this place will be respected. No clutter piles in the hall, no half-finished projects sitting around for months. It's my property, and it stays in good shape." Dad shifted, clearly uncomfortable, but he nodded. "Second," I continued, "you each need to be working towards something. A job, a certification, even volunteer work. You're not going to sit here and rot in front of the TV all day. If you want to stay, you keep moving forward." Mom's mouth tightened. "We're not lazy." "I didn't say you were," I cut in. "But I watched what happens when people stop trying. It's not good for them or the people around them." I leaned forward, softening my voice. "Third, we treat each other with respect. That means no dismissing my opinions, no talking over me, and no acting like my achievements are accidents or luck. I've worked too hard for that." They were both quiet now. Mom's gaze drifted to the photo of Grandma again. "Last," I said, "we talk honestly. If something's wrong, we deal with it. No passive-aggressive comments, no pretending it's fine when it's not. We break that old pattern right here." Dad let out a slow breath. "And if we don't agree?" I didn't flinch. "Then you'll have 60 days to find somewhere else." The words hung in the air. I knew they stung, and part of me hated that it had come to this. But another part of me knew this was the only way. We couldn't go back to the old dynamic where they decided what was mine and what wasn't. Finally, Mom nodded. "All right," she said quietly. "We can do that." Dad looked at her, then at me. "We'll try." It wasn't an apology, but it was a start. I stood, smoothing the sleeve of my blazer. "Good. Then welcome home." They didn't smile, not yet. But I could feel something shifting, not just in the room, but in us. The balance was different now. For the first time, we were meeting as equals, not as the girl who had once slept in a stripped-down room and the parents who had taken it away. And maybe, just maybe, that was the first step toward something better. The weeks that followed were surprisingly calm. I noticed little changes first. Dad started waking up earlier, taking morning walks around the neighborhood before breakfast. Mom cleared out the cluttered boxes she'd been keeping in the spare bedroom, the one that used to be mine. Sometimes they'd stop by my office downtown bringing coffee or lunch. They never said it outright, but I could tell they were curious about my world, the world I'd built without them knowing. One Saturday afternoon, I found Dad fixing the loose railing on the porch without me asking. Mom had planted marigolds and lavender along the front walk. For the first time, the house didn't just look like theirs or mine. It looked cared for. We still had moments of tension. Old habits don't vanish overnight. But there was a new undercurrent, respect. They asked before making changes. They listened when I spoke. And slowly, we began to talk more about the past without it turning into a fight. One evening, Mom handed me a small cardboard box. "I found this in the attic," she said. Inside was a folded quilt, pale yellow, with faded blue stitching. "My grandmother's quilt. She made this for you," Mom said softly. I forgot how much it meant to you." I ran my fingers over the worn threads. It smelled faintly of cedar and something I couldn't name. Maybe the past itself. Grandma's words echoed in my head. "Own the walls they think they control." I smiled, tucking the quilt under my arm. "I do," I said. "And I always will." That night, as I stood in the doorway of my own bedroom, in my own house, I spread the quilt across the bed. The same bed I'd chosen, paid for, and placed exactly where I wanted it. I thought about that 19-year-old girl who had walked out with nothing but a duffel bag and her determination. She wouldn't believe this was her life now, the freedom, the security, the quiet power. But I knew she'd recognize one thing. The unshakable truth that no one, not even family, gets to decide your worth. As the sun set over Oak Ridge Drive, I whispered the final words only I needed to hear. Funny how life works. They once took my room, and now I give them a home.